At just 22 years old, Clare Bernal had plans, ambitions, and a life she was building step by step. What happened during a routine workday would change everything, turning her story into one that continues to be remembered and discussed. On September 13th, 2005, at exactly 7:45 in the evening, a young woman named Clare Bernal was standing behind the cosmetics counter at Harvey Nichols in Knightsbridge, one of London's most exclusive department stores. She was smiling at a colleague across the way, probably thinking about going home soon since the store was about to close. Her colleague, Victoria Daniels, had just said something about it being nearly time to leave. Clare smiled back, and in that moment, as that smile crossed her face, a man crept up behind her in what witnesses would later describe as an almost military style. He moved quietly, deliberately. Victoria thought maybe it was a boyfriend surprising Clare, or perhaps just a silly customer, but then she saw him pull out a black pistol. He pointed it straight at the back of Clare's head, and he pulled the trigger. Clare was 22 years old. The man who killed her was Michael Petch, a 30-year-old former security guard who had worked at that very store. After shooting Clare 4 times, he turned the gun on himself. This is the story of how the system failed Clare Bernal and how a brief relationship turned into an obsession that nobody could stop. Clare Bernal was, by all accounts, a lovely person. Her mother, Tricia, would later say that Clare's only fault was seeing good in everybody. She was quiet, well-spoken, and popular among her colleagues at Harvey Nichols, where she worked as a beauty consultant. She was unaware of her own beauty, both inside and out, her mother said. Clare had her whole life ahead of her. She lived in Dulwich Village in southeast London, and she was the kind of person who trusted people, who believed in giving others a chance. That trust, that kindness, would ultimately be abused in the most horrific way imaginable. Michael Petch was born in what was then Czechoslovakia and later became a Slovakian citizen. He had served as a soldier in the Slovakian military and later worked as a security guard at the American Embassy in Bratislava. In September 2004, he secured a job as a security guard at Harvey Nichols in London. That's where he met Clare. They worked in the same building, saw each other regularly, and eventually, in February 2005, they began dating. But here's the thing. For Clare, it wasn't serious. She was interested in him, her mother would later explain, but she wasn't in love. It was casual, at least from her perspective. For Michael Petch, however, it was something entirely different. He became besotted with her, obsessed. The relationship, such as it was, didn't last long. One morning, Peach refused to leave Clare's flat. He just wouldn't go. Clare, realizing this wasn't normal behavior, sent him a text message ending the relationship. She thought that would be the end of it. She was wrong. Petch didn't take the rejection well. Not at all. He began pestering her at work, sending her text messages constantly. He threatened to kill himself. One message read, "Why are you so cold to me? Is it because you're English?" Clare didn't know what to do. She confided in her mother, and Tricia could hear the confusion and worry in her daughter's voice. This man wouldn't leave her alone. Then the stalking escalated. Petch started following Clare home from work. He would wait for her, watch her, track her movements. On March 30th, he boarded the same train as Clare at London Bridge Station. Clare had had enough. She confronted him and threatened to report him to the police. Petch's response was chilling. He put his face close to hers and said, "If you report me, I'll kill you." Let that sink in for a moment. A direct, explicit threat to kill her. Clare was terrified. She told her boss at Harvey Nichols what had happened, and the store urged her to go to the police. She did. A police constable came to see her and interviewed her for more than 3 hours. Clare gave a detailed statement about everything that had been happening. But here's where things start to go wrong. Despite this lengthy interview, despite Clare's clear account of being stalked and threatened, no attempt was made to take statements from her flatmates or work colleagues. No charges were brought at that time. However, Harvey Nichols did take action. They suspended Petch from his security guard position. You might think that would have been enough to make Petch back off. It wasn't. Within days, the stalking resumed. Petch began lying in wait for Clare outside her new flat in Dulwich. She called the police and they sent a car. but by the time officers arrived, Peach had vanished. Then, on April 10th, he showed up at her flat again. This time, the police managed to arrest him, but Claire noticed something disturbing. Peach wasn't fazed at all. As the officers handcuffed him, he held up his hands and smiled directly at Claire. That smile. That's when Claire and her mother realized just how sinister this man really was. But they thought, okay, the police have him now. They've arrested him. Surely they'll handle this. Surely Claire will be safe now. Peck was charged with harassment and breaking his bail conditions. He was remanded to Belmarsh Prison, one of the most secure prisons in Britain. Finally, it seemed like the system was working. But on April 19th, after appearing by video link at Tower Bridge Magistrates Court, something inexplicable happened. His case was put off until August 31st, and he was released on bail. Released. A man who had explicitly threatened to kill a woman who had been arrested for stalking her was simply let go. And here's the truly unbelievable part. The police never bothered to inform Claire or her mother that Petch was at large again. They had no idea he was free. They thought he was still in custody, that they were safe. But it gets worse. When Peck was released on bail, nobody thought to confiscate his passport. Nobody thought to monitor his movements or put any restrictions on his travel. So on April 25th, just 6 days after being released, Petch returned to Slovakia. And what did he do there? He underwent firearms training. He obtained a gun certificate, and he bought a Luger pistol. Think about that. A man on bail for stalking and threatening to kill someone was able to leave the country, get firearms training, and purchase a gun. The system that was supposed to protect Clare Bernal had failed at every single level. On July 20th, Peake returned to London by coach. He apparently smuggled the gun through customs without being searched. For the next 6 weeks, he was back in London, armed and dangerous, while Claire had no idea he had even left the country, let alone returned with a weapon. She was going about her life, working at Harvey Nichols, probably still shaken by everything that had happened, but trying to move forward. She had done everything right. She had reported him. She had given statements to police. She had trusted the system to protect her. Then came August 31st. Petch kept his court date. He appeared before the magistrates and pleaded guilty to harassment, though notably, he did not plead guilty to threatening to kill Claire. Claire was relieved. Her mother remembers her exact words. "Mom, thank God it's over. Now finally people will believe me and I can get on with my life." Can you imagine the relief she must have felt? After months of fear, of looking over her shoulder, of wondering when this nightmare would end, she thought it finally had. The man had pleaded guilty. Justice would be served. She could move on. But then came another devastating decision. Instead of sentencing Peck immediately, the court released him on bail again. They wanted pre-sentence reports prepared. So once again, this man who had stalked Claire, threatened to kill her, and pleaded guilty to harassing her was walking free. 13 days later, on September 13th, Michael Petch walked into Harvey Nichols with the Luger pistol in his pocket. He had apparently taken cocaine before entering the store. He made his way to the cosmetics section where Claire worked. He crept around the counter in that military style that Victoria Daniels would later describe. And as Claire smiled at her colleague, thinking about going home soon, Peach pulled out the gun and shot her in the back of the head. Victoria Daniels saw the whole thing. She watched as Peach fired the first shot, then fired 2 or 3 more times at Claire. Another assistant, Helen Quinn, saw Claire fall behind the counter. The sound of gunshots in that exclusive department store must have been surreal, terrifying. Customers and staff ran for their lives. It had been surreal, terrifying. Customers and staff ran for their lives. And then came the final shot. Peach turned the gun on himself. When police arrived, they found 2 bodies. Clare Bernal, a 22-year-old woman whose only crime was briefly dating the wrong person, lay dead behind the cosmetics counter. And Michael Petch, her killer, had taken his own life. At 2:45 that morning, there was a loud knock on Tricia Bernal's door. Her partner opened it to find 2 policemen standing there. Tricia came downstairs in her dressing gown. The officers said, "Claire's dead. Your daughter's been shot." Tricia knew immediately. "I knew it was Petch," she said. Every mother's worst nightmare had come true, and as Tricia began to learn more about the events leading up to her daughter's murder, she became increasingly angry. Not just at Peck, but at what she called the systemic failings that had allowed this to happen. Think about the timeline here. Petch had been arrested twice for stalking Clare. He had made a direct, explicit threat to kill her. He had demonstrated clearly obsessive behavior. He had shown he had no fear of the police, smiling at Clare as he was being handcuffed. Yet even as harassment charges were pending, he had been permitted to travel abroad and buy a gun. He had been granted bail not once, but twice. The last time was on August 31st, just 13 days before he murdered Clare. As Tricia Bernal put it, basically, he was allowed to go away and plan my daughter's murder. At no point did my daughter get the protection she needed and deserved. The inquest into Clare's death opened in November 2005. It should have been a straightforward process, but it became complicated and painful in ways that added to the family's grief. Clare's father, Martin, from whom Tricia had been divorced for 15 years, suggested from the witness box that Tricia had trivialized the threat posed by Petch when Clare tried to raise her concerns. He essentially accused her of not taking the matter seriously enough. It was a devastating accusation for a mother who had just lost her daughter. Tricia, sobbing, told the inquest that she had a very close relationship with Clare, that they discussed everything, that she believed the police were in control of the situation. "That is my mistake, and I have to live with that," she said. But Tricia refused to be silenced or intimidated. When the Westminster coroner, Dr. Paul Knapman, said it was with no enthusiasm whatsoever that he was reconvening the inquest to May to allow more time for statements to be gathered from police, courts, and customs, Tricia stood firm. "This is the only avenue that bereaved families have to question the system," she said. "If I can save one person's life by highlighting weaknesses in the system, then it will be worth it." Dr. Knapman himself questioned the judicial process during the proceedings. He pointed out that people had been called before magistrates' courts for 800 years in Britain, and they used to be dealt with, punished, and sent to prison. But in this case, Peach was remanded again and again, sent for probation reports, given chance after chance. 2 days before he was due to see the probation service, he walked into Harvey Nichols and shot Clare Bernal. Shortly after the shooting, Scotland Yard issued a statement saying that police could not be blamed for failing to predict that Petch's stalking would turn to murder. But that statement rings hollow when you look at the facts. This wasn't unpredictable. Peach had explicitly threatened to kill Clare. He had told her, "If I can't have you, nobody will." He had demonstrated obsessive, escalating behavior. Every warning sign was there. The Charity Refuge, which campaigns against domestic violence, pointed out that Clare Bernal's case was really no different from that of other victims of violent and abusive men. 2 women a week are killed by a current or former partner in the UK. And often, these deaths are directly due to the absence of proper police training and procedures for assessing the risk posed by stalkers or men who commit domestic violence. Sandra Horley, Refuge's chief executive, said it plainly. Clare Bernal did all that she could to stay safe, but the system failed to protect her. Clare had reported Peck. She had given statements. She had followed every piece of advice she was given. She had trusted that the police and the courts would keep her safe. But at every turn, the system let her down. Nobody confiscated Petch's passport. Nobody monitored his movements while he was on bail. Nobody informed Clare when he was released from custody. Nobody stopped him from leaving the country. Nobody caught him when he smuggled a gun back into Britain. Nobody thought to keep him in custody after he pleaded guilty to harassing her. The failures were multiple, systemic, and ultimately fatal. Tricia Bernal's questions are the questions we should all be asking. Petch had broken the law 3 times. He had demonstrated clearly obsessive behavior. He had made specific threats to kill. He had shown he had no fear of the police. Yet in all the months he was on bail, no one thought to check what he was up to. Why? Why was a man who had threatened to kill someone allowed to keep his passport? Why was he granted bail after pleading guilty? Why wasn't Clare informed when he was released? Why wasn't there a proper risk assessment? These aren't complicated questions. They're basic, fundamental questions about how we protect vulnerable people from those who wish to harm them. Clare Bernal's story is a tragedy, but it's also a warning. It's a reminder that stalking is not a minor crime. It's not something to be dismissed or minimized. It's often a precursor to violence, even murder. When someone explicitly threatens to kill another person, that threat must be taken seriously. When someone demonstrates obsessive behavior, refuses to accept rejection, and continues to pursue someone despite being told to stop, that's not romance. That's not persistence. That's danger. And the system needs to recognize that danger and act accordingly. The colleagues who worked with Clare at Harvey Nichols were devastated. Many hugged each other and burst into tears when they arrived at work the day after the shooting. They had known Clare was being stalked. It was, as one colleague put it, well known he was stalking her. They had witnessed her fear, her attempts to get help, her relief when she thought it was finally over, and then they had witnessed her murder. Some of them saw it happen right in front of them. The trauma of that will stay with them forever. The store offered counseling to help staff deal with what they had experienced, but how do you process something like that? How do you return to work in a place where you watched a colleague, a friend, be murdered? Tricia Bernal has had to live with the loss of her daughter every single day since that September evening. She has had to live with the knowledge that Clare did everything right, and it still wasn't enough. She has had to fight to have her daughter's case properly investigated, to have the systemic failures acknowledged, to try to ensure that other families don't suffer the same tragedy. She has had to endure accusations from her ex-husband, delays from the coroner, and the indifference of a system that failed her daughter. But she has refused to be silent. She has refused to let Clare's death be forgotten or dismissed as just another tragic incident that couldn't have been prevented. Because it could have been prevented. That's the hardest truth of all. If Peach's passport had been confiscated, he couldn't have gone to Slovakia to buy a gun. If he had been kept in custody after pleading guilty, he couldn't have walked into Harvey Nichols with a weapon. If proper risk assessments had been conducted, if Clare had been informed when he was released, if the threat he posed had been taken seriously from the beginning, Clare Bernal might still be alive today. She might be 41 years old now, living her life, maybe with a family of her own, but instead she's frozen in time at 22, a victim of a system that failed to protect her. The coroner recorded a verdict of suicide on Michael Petch. As for Clare, her inquest was adjourned and reconvened multiple times as more information was gathered. But no verdict, no investigation, no amount of questioning can bring her back. What it can do, what Tricia Bernal hopes it will do, is change the system. It can highlight the weaknesses, the gaps, the failures that allowed a dangerous man to plan and carry out a murder despite being known to police, despite being on bail, despite having pleaded guilty to harassing his victim. Clare Bernal's story matters because she matters. She was a real person with a real life, with family and friends who loved her, with dreams and plans for the future. She wasn't a statistic. She wasn't just another victim of domestic violence. She was Clare, and she deserved better. She deserved a system that would protect her when she asked for help. She deserved to be believed, to be taken seriously, to be kept safe. She deserved to live. That's all for today. Don't forget to subscribe and be kind to each other.